this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about the 10th edition leader rules and how they interact. It's pretty straightforward, but I've had a lot of people ask me to do this video, so we're going to go ahead and knock it out. Leader is a tag that you'll see on certain units. It's character units, right? Some character units will have leader. It is listed on their data sheets. And then during the declare battle formations step, which is the old declare reserves transport step, for each leader in your army, you can attach the leader to one of its bodyguard units. And then bodyguard units are listed on the leader data sheet. So let's take a look at an example data sheet. So here we have the Primaris Captain. It tells you what he's equipped with, and then it gives you leader, and then tells you what his bodyguard units are. So if you look, he can go into an Assault Intercessor squad, a Blade Guard veteran, a Hellblaster, an Infernus, an Intercessor, or a Stern Guard veteran squad. And if you see an asterisk marked next to one of those squads, it just means there's some sort of prerequisite you have to have before you can attach it. So the Primaris Captain cannot go into a Blade Guard veteran squad unless it is equipped with a Relic Shield, and cannot go into a Hellblaster squad unless it is equipped with a Plasma Pistol. He can go in any of those squads. It's real easy, but he can only go in certain squads as long as he meets the equipment prerequisites. Again, pretty straightforward. It all makes sense so far. Bodyguard units and leaders. Each bodyguard unit may only have one leader attached to it. While a bodyguard unit contains a leader, it is known as an attached unit. Attached units, it is treated as a single unit for all rules purposes except for rules that are triggered when units are destroyed. So this means the leader and the bodyguard come together to just form one slightly bigger unit. When an attacking unit targets the attached unit, until all of the attacking unit's attacks are resolved, you use the toughness of the bodyguard unit. And what that means is, okay, so let's say I've got a squad that's shooting at your bodyguard unit. Let's say your bodyguard unit only has one model left. Even if I get 30 attacks, all 30 of those are resolved against the bodyguard unit's toughness, not the character's toughness. It doesn't matter. You don't use the character's toughness until it's in its own standalone unit, which we'll kind of dig into a little bit more later. All wounds inflicted on attached unit must go to the bodyguard unit, even if the character has already lost wounds. So let's say I hit somebody with a precision attack, or it takes immortal wounds from a hazardous weapon, and your character now has taken 3 wounds worth of damage and has 2 wounds left. All attacks still go to the bodyguard unit, even though the character has lost wounds. And really the easiest way to look at it is that for most instances, the bodyguard unit is just a blade of wounds to help keep your characters on the table, and that's really all it is. As soon as the last bodyguard model has been destroyed, any remaining attacks that need to be resolved are then resolved against the character. However, remember, you're still just going to roll your hits, your wounds, against the bodyguard unit. And then if there's anything left over, they just automatically spill onto the character. And a good example of this is Ghazghkull is T6, but Orc Boys are T5. And I don't know if Ghazghkull can go in Orc Boys, but that's not the point. All your attacks will be resolved against the Orc Boys' toughness. Even though you might have 30 attacks and we kill all the boys, you're still making your attacks against the T5 toughness for the one unit. Again, it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's pretty easy. All right, so let's dig into this counts as one unit. And what that means is for starting strength, you'll add the number of leader models to the starting strength of the bodyguard unit. In most cases, it just means you add 1 to the starting strength. So if you have a 10-man of intercessors and you put 1 Primaris Captain into it, it now has a starting strength of 11. If the leader dies, the bodyguard unit reverts to its original starting strength. But if the bodyguard unit dies, the leader reverts to its original starting strength. And using that previous example, that means if you kill 10 intercessors and only the leader is left, his starting strength is equal to his wounds. But if you kill the leader and only the bodyguard's left, its starting strength is equal to the number of models it had when you started the game. For strats, auras, and special rules, they affect both the bodyguard and the leader when used on the unit because they count as one unit for all rules purposes except rules that are triggered when the unit is destroyed. And then these are just triggered when either of the units is destroyed. And we will do some examples. So let's break that down. For strats, auras, and abilities, let's look at Gaz. All right. His bodyguard unit and he would both benefit from the profit ability, because the profit ability says, while this unit is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, add 1 to the hit roll and 1 to the wound roll. So Gaz would also benefit from his own +1 to hit, +1 to wound, because he gives it to the unit and then they count as one big unit now. It also means Makari would benefit from it, but that, again, isn't going to matter, because, again, they are all just one big unit now. The same would hold true for his banner, because you count as being within range of your own auras. He's giving himself and the unit he's attached to his own banner aura, and so they'll both just get it. In addition, let's look at the Here We Go strat. You pick one orc infantry unit from your army, add 2 to advance and charge rolls made for your unit. So if Gaz is in a unit of Mega Knobs, for example, and you use that strat, they both get that benefit because they count as one unit. And I know I'm kind of beating this horse to death, but I just want to make sure everybody understands. It doesn't matter what the rules are, because they all just count as one big unit for all rules purposes, except rules triggered on unit death. If a rule is triggered by a unit dying, then both the leader and the bodyguard unit count as 2 separate units for this. And there is a great example in the book, and what it does is it talks about gaining victory points for destroying units. So if a rule awards you with victory points each time an enemy unit is destroyed, then you would get a victory point for destroying the attached unit, and you would get a victory point for destroying the leader unit, because they count as separate units if it is triggered by the unit's death. And that's how that interacts. And it's the only time you ever treat them as different units. Now let's talk about the death of bodyguards and the death of characters. If the bodyguard unit dies, you are then left with a leader or character, right? And then if the unit model doesn't also have the lone operative rule, it can then be targeted like any other unit. And all lone operative says is you can't target it with attacks unless you're within 12 inches. We'll get into that in a little bit. Remember that the character counts as being at its original starting strength, which would be its total wounds if the bodyguard dies, excuse me. If the character dies, say from precision or hazardous, then the bodyguard unit is just treated as a regular whatever it is, which we already talked about. And it just interacts as if it never had the character or leader. And again, super, super easy. Lone operative, if it is not part of an attached unit, then you cannot target it unless you're within 12 inches with attacks. Some units have both lone operative and leader, like the Tech Marine, right? And the Tech Marine bodyguard, so if the Tech Marine bodyguard dies, it can then use its lone operative ability to help keep it from getting shot off the table by being within 3 inches of a friendly vehicle. Keep in mind that not all characters are going to have both of these abilities, so you need to know which ones interact in this way, and you're going to need to be careful. Precision is going to be an interaction that you're going to need to know for your attached units. When attacking players make an attack against an attached unit, you attack the bodyguard. But then you may choose to have your successful wounds just allocate to the character instead of following the normal sequence. What this means, though, is that it means you're still going to use the bodyguard's toughness, and then it will work for both melee and shooting, and the only caveat is that the character must be visible. So you can't see the attached unit and then target the character if the character is not visible. And that goes, again, for both melee and shooting. And it makes sense. So it's one of those where it's kind of a weird interaction because you're just always using the bodyguard unit's toughness. But what you're doing is you're just making an attack against the bodyguard. If you hit and you wound, you can just be like, oh, this has precision. My 3 wounds are just going to go to your character instead of your bodyguard unit. And again, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It makes sense. The one thing I need to point out is that precision does not interact with lone operative in any way. So you cannot use precision to override lone operative. So just so you guys are aware of that. I think that's going to wrap up our talk about the leader units and how they interact. Again, keep subscribing. Our subscribers numbers are going up. I appreciate that greatly. It's a great community we are building, and I love it. Big shout out to Military Gaming Command. We are building a MGC 40k team that's comprised of veterans. We will be looking to do our first MGC event within the next few months. So if you go to events, keep a lookout for us. And then an Apocalypse game July 1st. It is a fundraiser for that nonprofit. And then a tournament on the 29th. I will also have a league coming up here soon. And then a couple of terrain projects coming up. I'm building a diorama with my kids. We're going to do a couple other things. So there's going to be some crafting videos coming out too. So once again, I thank everybody. Big shout out to my immortals, Captain Too Tall, The Real Donnie G, Lord Wellingstone. And then thanks for watching. Links on the screen and in the description. Again, you guys are great. I appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed the video.